Hello everyone, I hope that you're doing great. I trust that you're doing wonderfully well. Today is a life coaching video, or more about a life enhancement video, and it's relating to a video I'd made previously about last year regarding caffeine and coffee consumption. If you go on my YouTube channel, you'll see that there's one video entitled Breaking Free of the Caffeine Chemical Crutches. So at that time, the focus was on my releasing caffeine from my life. So in other words, no longer consuming caffeinated coffee and caffeinated tea, but mostly coffee because that was the coffee that I had been drinking. As mentioned in that video, my reasons for drinking, my reasons for no longer wanting to consume caffeine were spiritual. I had been receiving lots of messages from the universe, and also I felt in my body physically that there was a lot of adrenaline in my system. Sometimes my heart would beat very fast at work, or I felt like my sleep wasn't as deep and full as it could be, and that my mood was a little bit off sometimes. So I stopped drinking caffeine, and it went really well at that time for a couple of months actually, because I was living alone back then. And now fast forward to about approximately 1 year later, and my life has changed a lot in the sense that I now live with my family. I relocated back to New York, and I've been here for the past year. And so the point is that I actually started to consume caffeine again when I came back home. My family is Colombian, so they love their coffee, and there is no such thing as decaf in their part of the world. So it's just full, authentic, bold coffee. And initially moving back home, it was okay for me to resist it. I didn't have to drink it. I would get decaf options, organic decaf, and that was great. But then we went to Colombia, and then there was really no decaf coffee there. It just didn't really exist, and I didn't want to buy it for just 2 weeks worth. So ultimately, being surrounded by my family, having coffee at my disposal, I started to drink it again. And that was fine. But then when I came back home, I continued that bit of a habit as a form of nostalgia. And then I started to notice that in summary, what I've noticed from coffee consumption, caffeine consumption through coffee, is that I have noticed in me that my emotions tend to have these swings. And I will go the first couple of days will feel really good, but then I'll reach a point in my week, or in like 2 weeks worth of time or duration, where I suddenly start to feel more negative and down on myself. I start to get a little bit more, like my perspective is like shifting towards negativity and feeling pessimistic, feeling sad about where I am in life or whatever. I've noticed that when I've resumed caffeine consumption, and then I go back on to no longer having the caffeine. I have decaf, which works fine for me. However, the most important thing is that what happens when I consume caffeinated coffee is that my emotions take a dive, and I take a turn for the worse. So my intention in doing this video is to share my experience, because perhaps you might experience something similar in your emotions. Sometimes we experience moods, but we don't know why. We feel low and depressed, and we think we don't know why, and then we attribute it to something that happened. But in reality, you know that in other circumstances it hasn't been such an influence or factor in your emotional stability. So perhaps if you're considering cutting caffeine from your consumption, then I would encourage you to explore this possibility that perhaps caffeinated coffee and caffeinated beverages are altering the chemical stability and flow of the chemicals in your brain, because that's what I've experienced. And again, everyone is different, so some people do fine, or so they say, right? Because they just don't want to change. So it's sort of like the stories that we tell ourselves to like be okay with where we are so that we don't make any changes and create some discomfort. However, we can shift, and I invite you to consider this if it's something that you've been contemplating, if you'd like to perhaps experiment with it in terms of your self-control and self-mastery, then possibly the beverage that you consume every day without fail, and potentially for more than 16 ounces, which is 2 cups, which is actually not that much when you factor in people that go to Starbucks, and a typical tall, like, which is the small size, it is a little bit more than 8 ounces, I'd say. So coffee is a really wonderful beverage. However, it's important to also acknowledge the effect that substances have on our well-being, our health, our mental stability. Because if you want to perform at your best and feel your best, then you really need a empowered mindset, and you really need a functioning brain that's running on all cylinders, and where you can be at peak performance. And if you research further into the way that caffeine actually affects the brain, it's by latching onto certain neurochemical receptors in the brain that cut off the feeling of fatigue. So as we consume more and more of it, running on less and less sleep and rest and recovery, you're signaling to your body, I don't need the rest, because you're compensating with coffee, with caffeine. But in reality, your body really needs that, and that's how it's going to maintain homeostasis. So this is essentially going back to your natural self, your more authentic self, and experimenting with something that might actually enhance your life. And even if you then decide to go back to caffeine after a month or 2 months of this trial, then at least you'll have an awareness of what this is about for your own knowledge and your own life experience. So that's my life coaching life tip for today, is to consider the effect that caffeine might be having on your brain. There's definitely a reason why it's the favorite consumption of billions of people around the world. And it's worth asking yourself, like, why is it universal? And then perhaps it's doing something to alter our brain functioning and our emotions. So yeah, so that's it for now. Thanks for listening and watching. And if you have any feedback, let me know about your experience with caffeine and coffee. I know it's not simple, straightforward, and definitely not easy to do in our society. No matter where you are in the world, there's a high likelihood that there's coffee consumed, and it's probably not decaf. But decaf is always an option, and it works for me because I love the bitter taste of coffee. So yeah, so thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon with another life coaching life tip. Bye!